Hey everyone, Catch 'em All Collectibles here. In today's video, I'm going to discuss PSA versus CGC versus BGS. I used the Pokemon News generic thumbnail. It's one of those topics that continually comes up. Which one I use and when and why. What is the market share of each one of them? A couple topics that I've covered periodically in the past, but it's an ever-changing dynamic thing. You can make the same video title, same content, year after year after year, if not just month after month, quarter after quarter, and refresh it with like the state of today. So yeah, I'm choosing to look at PSA versus CGC versus BGS just to reiterate some points and to cover some things from my perspective. Not just my perspective either. Certain parts of every video will be my slant, my take, my biases, and I'll address that. Everyone is always going to have their own bias. What you report on has some inherent bias to it, right? So just the fact that I'm making this video, just the fact anyone makes any video, there's a bias on what is reported on and what is not, what is talked about and what is not. So I always try to disclose those and disclaim those as best I can. Anyways, let's get right into it. So this is an ongoing sheet. I will quickly shout out, sponsored by the Pokenomics Patreon. Feel free to join here if you want to see a bunch more cool data like you are going to see in today's video. But yeah, this is data that I originally put together for, looks like I did it in April, start of quarter 2, 2023. I have several things that I touch back to on a recurring basis in the Patreon through our monthly Zoom meetings. I present quarterly. We do it monthly combined. Jake, myself, and then a guest alternate every month. But yeah. So what you're looking at is sales in millions of dollars in the toys and hobbies collectible card games category. This is all sourced from Terapeak. I've done multiple shorts. I've done multiple videos where I show you how I get the data. Everyone can go into the research tab on eBay, into the Terapeak tab. And this is quarterly sales. Pokemon as a whole. And then these three categories here are Pokemon PSA. They're like subsets of the entire Pokemon. So the whole here, subset PSA Pokemon, CGC Pokemon, and then BGS Pokemon. You'll note that these three numbers don't add up to this number here. That's because, I mean, there are more than the three major grading card companies that grade Pokemon cards. And then there's also like booster boxes. There's also raw cards. So these are a subset, but they're not an exhaustive subset of the first column. So anyways, people are constantly always talking. Our sales up, our sales down. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just go to the source? Why don't we go to Terapeak and just look at the data? I will note, you do see, I mean, quarter 4 of 2021, quarter 4s are generally pretty robust, given it's Christmas time, leading into Christmas time, all that stuff. Seasonality of sales that people are always talking about, and I think over-exaggerating to some extent. But you can see quarter 2 of 2023 ended in the end of June. Start of July was start of quarter 3. So quarter 3 is incomplete. Quarter 3 is, I'm recording this on September 8th. That is July 1st through September 8th. It is incomplete, so you cannot compare this row completely to the rows above it. However, you can compare BGS to CGC. CGC to PSA. Those are apples to apples. Those are like fair comparisons because they're the same duration. Whereas comparing the 28.1, please don't say the sky is falling. We've only done 20. It's not a complete quarter. I mean, it does look like it's going to end up being lower than the last quarter, which was actually significantly lower than the first quarter of 2023. I mean, you can see a drop of 64.9 million to 44.1 million. Whereas, I mean, overall, it's actually interesting to see. Looks like a significant amount of raw sales were lost. A significant amount of maybe sealed product sales were lost. Maybe that's, I mean, there's one thing, there's the data. Numbers don't lie, right? But people tell different narratives with the data. I always try to like stay back from that, but again, we can't help ourselves trying to explain things away. So my best thought on explaining that away or explaining it, booster boxes from like the recent sets especially. Generally speaking, the newest sets sell the best and the prices are just not amazing. So maybe some amount of the quarter 2 slump, Scarlet and Violet era, the boxes are at $90, $100 compared to historically Sword and Shield era. A lot of these quarters up here encompass the Sword and Shield era, those boxes were a lot more expensive then, probably selling at even higher volume. You know, people love to buy high. People love to buy things more when they're expensive on their way up, right? Whereas when the prices go down, they're often not buying as much. So maybe that's a little bit of the Q2 slump going on right there. What else it may be, I don't really know. But it is interesting to see. Q2 Pokemon as a whole in the collectible card game category slumped heavily, 30% approximately, 20 million on 65 million. PSA went up. CGC went up. BGS went up. So graded card sales actually went up in that quarter, while overall everything else went down. Interesting to note, I didn't thoroughly look at this data before I started recording this video, so I'm kind of experiencing some of this for the first time. I just like mindlessly posted the numbers in here before and then hit record. But yeah, again, the data is the data. Numbers don't lie. Everything else that I'm saying, that's my opinion. That might be my biases working. We'll talk about my biases in a minute. One interesting bit of data, and this is something going back to the fact that this is a sneak peek into data that I provide on a recurring basis in the Pokenomics Patreon. I've heard so many people discuss what goes on in the paywall, all these theories about market manipulation and such. I give people data. I spend time compiling data. I try to give as little commentary around it as possible, but it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if you just give the data, a lot of people ask, well, what does it mean? It's meaningless to just give the data. You got to tell me what it means. This is one thing that I'm pulling out of it. This is what I know it's going to anger some people maybe, but the data is the data. PSA to CGC ratio. So what I did is I just took simply PSA's total sales over CGC's total sales for the quarter. And you can see that number, it was 8.4. 8.4 times as many dollars sold in PSA slabs as CGC slabs. 7.4, 6.8, 6.5. Downtrend through second half of 2022, first half of 2021. And then it popped back up. It actually was on the uptick. And I'm a guy on YouTube who sells cards through PSA, CGC, BGS. I sell every slab, every label, every color. Equal opportunity, whichever one can make me money. I dabble in all of them, and I'll discuss that in a little bit too. But big changes came out recently for CGC. They did a new label. They stopped calling Gem Mint 9.5. They now call Gem Mint 10. And you can see CGC sales Q3 being incomplete are almost what they were all of Q2. So Q3 is clearly going to be higher than Q2 was. Q2 was higher than Q1. CGC is definitely on the uptrend. PSA, incomplete quarter, we can't really say for sure, but it looks as if it's going to be down slightly. So the CGC ratio, the PSA to CGC ratio is decreasing, which means that as a percent of total market share, CGC is climbing. Some of that might be like double sales of a card sold as a 9.5, immediately recased, resold as a 10. Again, there's a lot of different slants that people could put on that depending on what narrative they're trying to spin. But the data is the data. So that's just the data there. You can do, and one great thing that I think we do in the Pokenomics Patreon, we don't tell you what to buy. We don't give you the fish. We don't say that these are the fish you need to go. We teach you how to fish. We give you data. We spend our time compiling information and then do with it what you will. These spreadsheets can all be downloaded. All the past spreadsheets, all the past monthly Zoom files are there. And I will say, like, I'm not going to show it all here because I did originally an hour and a half presentation on this. I have booster box pricing. I have Magic. I have MetaZoo, Yu-Gi-Oh! I have Weiss. I have sports. I have all these different things. Not just, like, I have a total pulse of the cardboard market. Booster boxes. I mean, Terapeak is a powerful tool that a lot of people just don't use. They take their little anecdotes and they use their confirmation bias to show them what they want to see. But yeah, tons of data there if you're interested. Average sales price is also there. I did similarly for that. Pokemon over time seems like it's been trending down, bumped up a little bit late Q4 2022, and then these are average sale price. So whereas above you couldn't take the Q3 row and compare it to Q2, these ones you actually can compare universally. You can compare these universally because it's an average item price. And you can see the PSA to CGC ratio has been in a downtrend, pretty steady. So meaning originally $214. That was like in the bubble territory. That was in the bubble territory where things were insane. A lot of WotC stuff was really insane. Quarter 3 2021. And the average sales price of PSA cards have come down nearly 50%. I mean, actually over 50% at one point, but they've kind of rebounded as of late. CGC prices were at 82, and then they went down quite a bit lower, and they're up to 106 right now. They're not one-to-one with PSA, but they're getting there. They're getting closer. So again, it's just the data. You can download this spreadsheet if you join the Patreon. You can calculate any which way you want to. I mean, you can do the ratio of PSA to BGS, BGS to PSA, however you want to look at it. CGC versus BGS. It's just the data. So yeah, little bit of disclaimers that I want to give. I spelled disclaimers wrong because I threw this together pretty quickly here. Quarter 3 is not yet complete, which I already talked about. I already talked about CGC potentially having some spikes, just as like the anti-CGC side, because I don't have any blind allegiance to one of these companies. I think one common thing that you see, there are certain people that have a blind allegiance to one of the 3 companies. They will only talk about the positives of one. Everything is cons of the others. There's no like give and take. It's just universal, like only this one, not that one. And this is only eBay. Terapeak only covers eBay data up to 2 years in the past, more than the 90 days you get looking at sold listings. And this is just the data. There's no feelings, no one's biases. So first thing that I would think if I was watching a PokeTuber, it's like, well, what are Dan's biases? What does he own? What is he selling? And I've heard people talk about how I'm sponsored by this. How much are you paid by that? I'm not paid by any grading company. No grading company reached out to me, asked me to make this data. I am not sponsored. I'm not affiliated with any grading card company in that fashion. I've never been paid by a grading card company, and not that I never will take a sponsor. If and when I did, I would fully disclose. I would fully do all the legal disclosures that you have to do. But anyways, I would wonder, like, well, how much of each does Dan sell? This seems to be like, he's showing a little bit of data that shows that CGC is kind of like catching, almost like the big marketing change they just made to call a gem mint a 9.5, to call a gem mint a 10 instead of a 9.5, as PSA does. Almost as if that might be like working. Again, look at the data for yourself, however you want to take it. Maybe he just has a ton of CGC slabs that he's trying to pawn off on everybody. Maybe all he sells is CGC, and maybe he's invested in CGC. If you've watched my channel for a long time, you know I don't really invest in this stuff. Some people tell me that I do. Again, some of it's semantics, some of it, I don't know. Let's just look at my inventory. Let's look at what I actively have sold the past 90 days. That's all eBay shows me quickly. So 90 days of sales. CGC Pokemon. This is searched in my eBay. I can't go into the page. I can't show you the actual sales. I guess you have to trust me some level that I actually pulled this like 10 minutes ago from my eBay. 599 CGC Pokemon sales in the past 90 days. 1,020 PSA Pokemon sales in the past 90 days. And then scrolling over a little bit, because this isn't quite on the screen, what do I have for active listings? You can actually see as I scroll over. Again, I'm not going to show all the data. This would take me like an hour and a half. I looked at Marvel, I looked at Sports, Panini, Prism, Bowman, Donruss, Upper Deck. If you want to see this presentation from back in April, I did it. You can join the Patreon, the sponsor of the video, and you can. I'm sponsored by myself. I'm sponsored by myself and Jake. So Grand Archive, Lorcana, Kakawau, that little flash in the pan that was going on. I don't know what Kakawau's doing anymore, but at some point I'll update this for all these. Just for today's video, I only updated it for the first couple columns here. But yeah, Metazoo, Flesh and Blood, Digimon, D-Spirits, Akora, a lot of those Kickstarter TCGs. Anyways, back to where I was at. So what does Dan have for sale? Dan only has 202 results for CGC Pokemon in his store. Dan has 1,100 results for PSA in his store. And some of those PSA ones are multi-quantity. I might have 40 PSA 10s, 40 PSA 9s in one listing. And some of those CGC are the same. Like, that's not how many units, that's just how many individual listings. Some of those run deep. More of the PSA are like onesie, twosie cards. A lot of those are consignor cards. I mean, a lot of the CGC cards are actually consignor cards too. But some of those are a fair amount of depth to the cards as well. Let me go back full screen for a second. Next, I'll show you. I mean, I've been talking for almost 15 minutes here. This is going to be a little bit longer than I'd hoped or expected. But let's go back into why do I use all 3 companies. Actually, let me bring this back up. Let me go back here for a minute. So I am a small fish in a big pond. These are huge numbers. I mean, my numbers on eBay last year, I mean, I mentioned, I made my video. If I remember, I'll link it up above. I did 1.2 million approximately in sales in 2022. Pokemon sales as a whole in 2022 were 260 million. And mine was on all platforms. Mine was private sales, public sales, everything together. Pokemon as a whole is 259 million in 2022. BGS Pokemon alone on eBay is 6.4 million. CGC is another 11.2 million. PSA is another 80 million. Like, one big reason that I use all three to some extent is that they can all fit so much business. Like, honestly, like, I mean, I do, for MetaZoo and how small of a market it is relative to Pokemon, I do pretty well in MetaZoo. I mean, I'm probably a pretty measurable percentage of like the total MetaZoo market in sales. But part of the reason, like, PSA is the biggest, but CGC and BGS are huge too. When you say that, and I don't actually have them pulled up. I looked before recording. I'm gonna pause briefly. So here we go. 2.7 million almost Pokemon cards have been graded with CGC, and then from Pokemetrics as of like a month ago when Pokemetrics stopped updating, or a couple months ago, whenever exactly it was. There's 8 to 8.5 million maybe Pokemon cards graded. So CGC is like a decent chunk of the market overall. Like there's a lot of CGC out there. I don't think it's worth it to just completely discount it. Me personally, I mean, if I had some major issue with them, it's perfectly fine to decide to only do business with one of the companies, or to only collect one of the company's cards. But when you just say that like it's stupid to do any other ones, like it's just ignoring large portions of the market. And as you can see, actually growing portions of the market too. Will quarter one of 2024, will those continue to grow for CGC? Will they continue to bite into the market share to some extent of sales on eBay? I mean, stay tuned to Pokenomics Patreon to see the future updates. Or just, I mean, you don't have to go. You don't have to go to the paywall either. Go to Terapeak. Go to Terapeak and look at the sales data. So many people talk about how MetaZoo never sells and how CGC never sells and this and that. And here I am shipping cards every day of PSA Pokemon, CGC Pokemon, BGS Pokemon, raw MetaZoo, all kinds of stuff. And don't get so sucked into the commentary. Look at the actual data. Going back and forth, going back to what company I use when and why, I guess. And here's one major example that I just beat to death. Again, don't come to the Pokenomics Patreon. If you listen to certain people about what goes on behind the paywall, you're going to go in and you're going to be very disappointed. I do not tell you, aside from 001 SVP and Unagabas and maybe Celebration Charizards, the same cards I talk about on YouTube for demonstration purposes. That's all I really talk about. I show you how to calculate EV. I show you how to look at pop reports, how to look at PSA versus CGC, which companies might grade more difficult, which companies might grade easier. But yeah, generally speaking, when it comes to a card that is so available as the 001 SVP, I've bought, maybe last batch I bought was 500. I bought 500 at once for 20 bucks a pop last time. I've probably bought nearly 1,000 at this point, and there's a lot of consumers out there. Some like the black labels, some like the red labels. Some like these are the ones that are grading misses. Some of them like the gold labels. Some of them like the new black and white labels. I want to give every consumer the opportunity to get what they desire, as long as there's margin. And yeah, it just allows you to move more product. Black label, Beckett gives you the moonshot. I mean, this one's clearly here. It's not sold, but I've sold a couple. I've sold a couple between $300 and $350. PSA gives you like the known brand, the market standard. And CGC gives you quicker turnaround times at significantly cheaper cost. I mean, if you're a, I forget what they call it, if you're a certain level member, $9.60 compared to $15 at PSA, compared to $16 at BGS. BGS is turning for me 3, 4, 6 months lately. PSA is 2, 3, 4 months lately. CGC is a month, maybe 3 weeks to 6 weeks or something. So they all have applications. I do this full time. I get hundreds, if not thousands, of certain cards in quantity. Very high liquidity, very high pop, but very high popularity. And I just want to be able to move them through all avenues possible. Again, here's Nagabas. CGC 10 Gem Mint. These are recent sales. $53 for Jolteon. $41 for a CGC 10 Gem Mint, which is less. I mean, I'm getting currently, I think I'm actually sold out of the PSA 10 EV Nagabas at about 50 or 52. But when you scroll down, 53 right there. So I sold out of these at 53 Gem Mint. But pristines though, you'll see a couple pristines here and there. These are the old label pristines. I put a little bit of a sale on those to get rid of those. Where's the newer label Nagabas? Here's a couple, like, not significantly more, but depending on the card. Oh, I'm looking at a different thing on my screen compared to you guys. Few bucks more here and there. And who knows? Again, I made the video last week. Some people got really worked up about the data. Some people didn't listen. I mean, a lot of people read the title, get outraged. They go in, they downvote, and they leave. I did not call every PSA 10 a participation trophy. When 95% of a card is getting PSA 10 that are submitted, light pre-grading, it clearly is shown by the market. More the black label. It's clearly shown by the market, and actually the pristines too. I mean, my last couple pristine Umbreons have sold in the mid to high 200s, whereas my last couple Gem Mint Umbreons have sold in the $130 to $150 range. So the market clearly shows that they want something a little more difficult to achieve. The PSA 10 rate is approximately 90%. The CGC 10 pristine rate. The Gem Mint 10 rate doesn't really count as much. Don't look at the combined 10 rate. Look at the elite one. I mean, Beckett has two 10s, right? They have the black label and the pristine. The black label's the tops, though. I mean, PSA has the 10 as the tops. CGC has the pristine. Beckett has the black label. When you try to buy, like, say someone was a consumer and they wanted to buy a top 50 percentile. I want to know that my Nagaba Eevee is better than half of everyone else's. I want to know I'm in the top half. You don't get that resolution with PSA. You actually don't get it with CGC 10 pristine either, I don't think. I think over 50%, somewhere in there, but significantly less percentage-wise. So you can actually get like a top 50, 40 percentile card with a CGC pristine 10. And then the black label, it's a top 80th percentile card because only 20% of cards get black labels. Reproducibility, all that aside, that's a different video. But yeah, this is just one little look into like what we potentially do, what we talk about. Feel free to join the Pokenomics Patreon if you're interested. If not, that's fine too. Link will be below. Let me know what you think, though. I think that is everything I wanted to cover. I guess one thing that I'm not doing as much of lately, but, well, Dan, you buy a big collection. I know you're talking about Nagabas, you got 1,000 of each. You're talking about 001 SVPs, you got 1,000 of them. You're talking about all these cards that you have so many of. Celebrations Charizard, you can go and buy 50 at a time on TCG Player. What if you have, like, a base set first edition Charizard? What if you have a one-off card, a onesie twosie, as I call them? What if you have that and you are trying to decide where you want to grade that? That is a different video entirely, and it's so much more difficult. I've graded tens of thousands of cards with every company, and it's just so much harder to tell you, especially because of the lack of reproducibility with these grading card companies oftentimes. And that's not just PSA, that's CGC, BGS. You can grade a black label, crack it out, and then it grades a 9.5, and then it grades a BGS 10, and then it grades a black label again. You can crack out a PSA 10, and then it grades an 8, and it grades a 9, and it grades a 10 again. You can grade a CGC 9.5, then they update the thing, you pay $5, you get a 10, you crack that out, then you get an 8, then you crack it out, then you get a 9. I mean, these are like extreme examples, but it's stuff that actually goes on. But obviously, as a business, I want to grade the one that yields me the most money. Fairly obvious. If you're going to get a PSA 10, that will outperform, I can't say universally, because like the Umbreon Nagaba shows where the pristine outperforms, but especially for like WotC, where the PSA 10 is not a participation trophy whatsoever. Mid-era, Gold Stars, PSA 10, base set first edition, WotC first edition, things like that, generally speaking, the 10 is going to be like at or above the CGC 10 pristine. The market's been showing that. Every card is different. I mean, you can find anecdotes that, again, you can show one piece of data that supports the argument you want to make. But if your card is potentially black label quality, that is, I've never seen a black label sell for under a pristine 10. I've never seen a black label sell for under a PSA 10. So that's kind of like tops. If your one-off card has a chance, I mean, it's probably positive EV to pay that amount of money, send it off and give it a shot. And then if it fails, BGS 9.5, BGS 10, maybe you crack it and you go for the PSA 10. And then if it fails that, there are certain cards, certain WotC cards, a lot of hubbub is being raised, how the CGC 10 gem mint is failing to achieve the PSA 10 gem mint prices for some of these WotC first edition cards. A lot of those would have been PSA 9s. So like the person that graded those, I mean, some people are probably cracking clean PSA 9s that are unlikely to get PSA 10s, and they're just slab optimizing them into CGC 10s. Like there is so much plastic arbitrage between the companies that, in my opinion, the market is very irrational in how they value cards, because a lot of these PSA 10 WotC first edition cards that come up too, the argument against the CGC 10 is that, well, that wouldn't be a PSA 10. Look at some of these PSA 10s. Crack that out. That's not a PSA 10. It's like, the more you think about it, the more silly some of it gets. Anyways, I'm over 26 minutes. I think that's plenty for today. I will be recording immediately after this video. You won't see it till a week from now when I'm just returning from Charlotte Collecticon. But I'm going to be recording a video on where does all this money come from? All this money in the hobby. And it's not going to be a super negative video about how are the prices so high, everything's going to zero. It's going to be a two-sided video. It's going to be like, where's all the money coming from? People not having enough money, people living paycheck to paycheck, blah, 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 all those stats, all those scary negative stats. And then the second half of the video is going to be like, how many millionaires there are. And like, more like, it's surprising it's not more. So I'm going to show two sides. Again, one set of data, one set of facts, but they can be spun two different ways, a million different ways, depending on what someone... So I'm going to try to show both sides, the positive, the bear case, the bull case. And yeah, that'll be next week's video. In between, there's going to be a PokeFlips. I'm going to be live on Retrospect's channel. I'll do a community post to link those things, Instagram post, all those things I normally do. But I think that's everything for today. Thought it was going to be a 15-minute video, and it was almost 30. So yeah, as always, let me know your thoughts below. Let me know what you think about the CGC potentially gaining a little bit of a ground. Do you think it's just a flash in the pan? Do the new label? Not gonna last, gonna burn right out soon. We'll wait and see what the data shows, and I'll be talking about it in the Patreon at some point once we have a better picture, if you're interested. So yeah, with that, I will catch you all later.